President Trump thought he could stop people from looking into some government stuff by being mean to a lady named Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. But guess what? It didn't work. This lady, Congresswoman Crockett, had this yellow folder, and when she opened it up and started reading from a secret report about how the government spent money on something called DNA testing, wow, the next hour and 20 minutes totally messed up what people thought about the president's team. It even showed how for a super long time, things had been sneaky with money, and it actually had something to do with the president's youngest son. So in this room where they were talking, the bright lights were shining on a shiny wooden table. The air conditioner was a little loud, making a humming noise that made it feel even quieter when nobody was talking. It smelled like old coffee and fresh paper. Someone's phone buzzed, but they quickly made it stop. News cameras were set up all around, and you could feel a little bit of heat from them. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett sat up straight in her chair. She looked really put together, like a total pro. She had on a sharp blue jacket over a plain white shirt, looking important but not showing off. Her cool, square glasses made her look really smart. Her hands were resting quietly on that closed yellow folder. Her fingernails were neat and simple, not fancy at all. Everything about her seemed practical and exact, just like how she asked questions. Across the room, the president was sitting with his helpers and lawyers. He looked really sure of himself. His dark blue suit looked like armor, and his bright red tie was like a sign that he was in charge. He was leaning back like he didn't care, tapping his fingers on the table because he was impatient. He was used to telling everyone what to do, not waiting for others. In the seats where people watched, Barron Trump was there. He looked like a serious 19-year-old now, trying to keep his face from showing anything. His neat gray suit and blue tie looked fancy in a quiet way. It was a big deal that he was there because he almost never shows up at these political things. He had a leather bag on his lap, and sometimes he would touch it with his long fingers. It looked like he was a little nervous. The room was full of important people from Washington. Helpers were whispering to big bosses. News reporters were leaning forward in their seats. People who worked for the government were typing super fast on their tablets. Cameras were clicking and moving, trying to catch everything people did and how they looked. Congresswoman Crockett said, "For the record," and her voice was surprisingly loud and clear, "I want to show everyone a paper called Document 457B. She said it was a report from a government checker that the people in this room asked for 6 months ago. She smoothly moved her fingers over the paper, finding the right spot. The president crossed his arms, and his usual smiley face disappeared for a second as he watched her hands. It felt like you could almost touch the tension in the room, like thick fog. Everyone stopped typing, the whispering stopped. Even the air conditioner seemed quieter as the Congresswoman started to talk. Her voice was calm and slow, cutting through the quiet like a sharp knife. Before she was on the committee checking up on things, Jasmine Crockett was known as a brave lawyer in Texas who fought for people's rights. Her mom was a teacher and her dad was an engineer, so she grew up knowing that you had to fight for what's right. When she was a lawyer helping people who couldn't afford one, she saw how the system could be twisted to help people with money and power. When she was working in the state government, people fought hard against her trying to make things better. Now, as a congresswoman, she had her biggest challenge yet. We get a quick look back to the night before, in her office. Crockett is up late looking at papers. Someone who knew secrets called her and gave her information that most people would be scared to touch. It was all about a secret government program that tested DNA and how money from it was sneaky and ended up helping the Trump family. Her main helper asked her, "Congresswoman Crockett, are you really sure you want to do this?" He sounded worried. "They will do everything they can to ruin you." She stopped for a moment and looked at a picture of her grandma on her desk. Her grandma marched with important people and taught her to be strong when things are tough. "Sometimes you have to take chances when it's about telling the truth," she said firmly. Back in the big room, Crockett started explaining things carefully. "This committee was made to make sure the government spends money the right way," she said. Her voice was clear and sounded sure. "For the last 6 months, we've been looking into stories that a lot of money from the government health department was secretly sent to a DNA testing program we didn't know about. In the seats for people watching, Barron Trump moved a little in his chair. It wasn't a big move, but the cameras noticed. His face still didn't show much, but his eyes were glued to Crockett. He was looking at her really closely, kind of like his dad would, but with something else mixed in, maybe a little bit scared. Document 457B shows that over $300 million went to a program called Project Legacy, the Congresswoman said. They said it was for looking into the genes of people with rare sicknesses. She turned a page in her paper. But we found out that this money was used to make special DNA technology that was later sold to companies that are directly connected to the president's family. Representative, this is just another one of your hunts to find something wrong. There's nothing sneaky here, just another try to make my time as president look bad. Crockett didn't blink. Mr. President, the papers show that your own family used this technology for their own tests, and the government paid for it. And those tests happened just before your youngest son went to New York University. The camera showed Barron Trump frowning a little. His face, which usually didn't show much, had a little bit of something that looked like, wait, could that be about me? My son has nothing to do with this, the president said quickly, sounding a little like he had to defend himself, not his usual super confident voice. So you're saying it's not true that Project Legacy did special gene tests on your son using technology made with government money, technology that was later sold to your family's private company for way less than it was worth? Barron Trump opened his leather bag, pulled out a paper, and looked at it for a bit, like he was checking something. His face still looked calm, but his fingers squeezed the paper a little tighter. People in the room started whispering. The Congresswoman didn't seem bothered, like she already knew what was going to happen. Mr. President, I have papers here that show $17 million of government money was specifically set aside for special gene matching tests, and that happened at the exact same time your son finished his doctor's checkups for getting into college. It got so quiet you could hear a pin drop. The people watching, the reporters, even the president's helpers seemed to stop breathing. Right at this important moment, the Congresswoman looked straight at Barron Trump, and her voice got a little softer. Mr. Trump, I know you might not have known about this money being used the wrong way. I'm not trying to get you in trouble, but I want to show how a system has let unfair things like this stay hidden from the American people. It was a moment where she showed a little bit of understanding, trying to connect with him even though they were on opposite sides. For the first time, Barron seemed to really see the Congresswoman, not just as someone against his dad, but as someone giving him something rare in Washington, honesty. There was a feeling in the air of what could happen next, but then the president jumped in. That's all just pretend stories, he said. My son got into college because he was good enough, just like he's gotten everything in his life. My family doesn't need the government's help. That's interesting, Crockett said, her voice calm, because according to these money papers, Project Legacy not only paid for these tests, but also gave a lot of money to the university in the same month your son got accepted. Barron Trump looked directly at the Congresswoman for the first time. They shared a silent moment, a look between them. Maybe he recognized something in her words, maybe even respected that her information was right. The feeling in the room got stronger, like waves, as Congresswoman Crockett kept building her case carefully. Each new thing she showed was like putting a stone in a wall that was getting harder and harder to ignore. Representative, the president said, sounding like he was talking down to her. These are just made-up stories. My family has never needed special favors. Crockett didn't stop. Then you don't know this signature? She slid a paper across the table. This is a note that allowed the special Project Legacy technology to be used for important family testing, signed by you 3 years ago. The president looked at the paper. For a second, he looked shaky, but then he got his calm face back. I sign tons of papers every day. This doesn't prove anything. This wasn't just any paper, Crockett kept going. It was kept super secret, and you had to look at it yourself. And weirdly, it was signed on the same day your son finished his tests for getting into college. Barron Trump looked down and fixed his tie. It was a small thing, but it showed he was bothered.
"Our time is precious here," said a congressman who was on the president's side. "Congresswoman Crockett is clearly just putting on a political show with nothing real to back it up." "I know my friend is worried about time," Crockett said calmly, "so let me be clear. We have proof here that $300 million of government money was sent to a program that directly helped the president's family. If we want to save time, the president could just say he knew about Project Legacy and what it was really for." The camera zoomed in on Barron. He was staring at his dad now, like he was waiting to see what he would say, just like everyone else there. "Maybe the representative is confused by these complicated money papers," suggested the president's lawyer, with a little bit of a mean smile. Crockett smiled a little too. "As a lawyer who fought for people and used to work with state money, I can tell you I understand these papers perfectly. What I wonder is if the American people would understand why technology made with their taxes was sold off for the Trump family's benefit." People in the room started murmuring. What she meant was clear, but she said,
These emails showed that the scientists in the program weren't sure about using the money for private tests, she explained, holding up the emails. The president waved his hand like it was no big deal. Scientists question everything. That's what they do. Including when they were told to make gene tests a top priority for someone called only Subject B? Crockett asked, looking back and forth between the president and Barron. Barron's calm face finally started to show something. He looked upset, and he opened his bag again, pulling out what looked like a copy of the same emails. "The representative is making up connections that aren't there," the president insisted, but his voice wasn't as sure as before. "Mr. President, the next paper is a security note allowing genetic samples from Subject B to be taken to government testing places with a special escort from the president's security. Is it just a coincidence that these dates match exactly the week your son finished his medical exams for college?" The president started to answer, but Barron, in a surprising move, stood up a little, like he wanted to speak, but then he sat back down, his face now tightly controlled. The tension got even higher when Crockett showed how the Trump's private science company sent money to the university. Papers show a $10 million gift for a special gene research program at the university exactly 3 weeks before your son got his acceptance letter, she said firmly. A university that, I should add, turned down several students with better grades and scores than his. The president slammed his hand on the table. "My son is super smart. Are you saying he didn't deserve to get in?" Crockett stayed calm, even though he was yelling. "I am saying that government money paid for technology that was used for your family's personal use, and that same technology was later sold to your company for big profits, while at the same time money was given to help your son get into college. Whether he deserved his spot isn't the main point. The point is that public money and influence were used wrongly." And the camera showed Barron's face. He looked really upset now, his fingers squeezing the paper in his hands so hard his knuckles were white. "Finally, Mr. President," Crockett said, making her voice a little lower, making her words sound more serious. "We have here a secret report from Project Legacy that explains the results of special matching tests for Subject B. Tests that cost American taxpayers $17 million and use technology that your company later bought for just $5 million. The room was totally silent. "These tests," she continued, "were super important not just for getting into college, but also for getting special medical help that only people with this special technology could get. Technology made with public money, but now only available to a few people who can pay for it." Right then, Barron Trump did something that shocked everyone. He suddenly stood up. His face, which usually didn't show much, now had a mix of feelings: anger, embarrassment, and something deeper. He looked determined. "May I speak?" His voice was clear and strong, surprisingly grown up for a 19-year-old. Everyone in the room froze. The reporters, the politicians, the people watching, all stuck in a moment of perfect waiting. Even Congresswoman Crockett seemed surprised for a second that he wanted to talk.
President Trump turned to his son, a silent warning in his eyes. Barron looked back at his dad for a tense moment. Something passed between them that the camera saw but couldn't quite figure out. It was a turning point, a moment where everything in the room felt like it was about to change in a big way. Congresswoman Crockett quickly got over her surprise that Barron wanted to talk. Looking completely calm like she always did, she spoke to the young Trump with respect. "Mr. Trump, this committee would definitely want to hear what you have to say," she said, making her voice sound truly respectful, not like she was talking down to him. Before Barron could say anything, the president jumped in. "My son is not the reason for this hearing," he said firmly. "He is only here to watch. These silly stories don't deserve to be answered, especially not bringing my son into this political show." He was trying to get back control. But Crockett saw this coming. She didn't fight with the president directly. Instead, she took a smoother way. "I understand you're concerned, Mr. President, and yes, we are not asking questions about your son specifically, but about how $300 million of government money was used." She paused for a moment on purpose. "But since you brought him up, I would like to ask you directly. When you allowed Project Legacy's technology to be used for special DNA tests on your son, did you know that these tests would cost American taxpayers $17 million? The president smiled.
If he said he did know, it would prove what she was saying was true. Right at this very important moment, Barron Trump stood up again, all the way this time. Looking surprisingly sure of himself, he spoke directly to the Congresswoman. "Representative Crockett, I would like to clear something up. I have some papers that might be important to this investigation." A shocked whisper went through the room. Cameras turned. Reporters leaned forward. President Trump looked at his son with a mix of surprise and worry. "Barron," he said quietly, and you could tell it was a warning. But the young Trump seemed to have made up his mind. He opened his bag and took out some papers. "I didn't know that my medical tests for getting into college used technology made with government money," he said, his voice steady even though you could feel the tension. "And I also didn't know that my family later bought this technology for private use." He looked straight at his dad, and his face looked determined. "But I found this out recently, and I believe the American public deserves to know the truth." The president tried to jump in, but Crockett, feeling how important this moment was, asked Barron a question directly. "Mr. Trump, are you saying that you didn't know how you got into college?" "I thought I got in because I was good enough," Barron answered, his voice now full of emotion he was trying to hold back. "Until I got this 2 weeks ago." He held up one of the papers. It was a detailed report showing how Project Legacy's technology was used to create a special gene profile that was shared with the university before he got accepted. President Trump, who looked really shaken by this sudden turn, tried to take back control. "My son is confused. These papers were made up by our enemies to cause problems in my family." Barron looked directly at his dad. "Dad, we both know that's not true. I found these papers in your own office after I heard someone talking about the Project Legacy problem." The room was completely silent now. Everyone was watching a family fight that was more than just about politics. It was about something deeply human. Crockett, seeing how sensitive the moment was careful. "Mr. Trump, could you explain what these papers specifically show?" Barron took a deep breath. "They show that my gene profile was used not only to help me get accepted, but also to create special treatments that are now only owned by our family science company. Treatments that could help millions of Americans but are being kept for people who can pay really high prices." He placed the papers on the committee table. "I believe technology made with public money should help everyone, not just my family." President Trump, his face now full of anger he was trying to hide, made a last try to stop things. "That's enough. This hearing is over. My son is clearly confused and is being controlled by the Democrats." Crockett stayed strong. "Mr. President, I wasn't the one who brought these papers to this hearing. It was your son who chose to speak up. This isn't about politics. It's about being responsible." She spoke to everyone on the committee again.
The papers Mr. Trump has given us prove exactly what our investigation found. Government money was used to create advanced gene technology that was later sold off for the benefit of the Trump family, while the public who paid for it couldn't use it. The president, now clearly angry, stood up suddenly. "This ridiculous show is over. My lawyers will handle this from now on." But before he could leave, Crockett made her final move, the trick question she had been planning for the whole hearing. "Mr. President, one last question. Did the special gene test done on your son show things you wanted to keep secret? Things about genes that might make people think differently about him?" It got totally silent. The president froze, and his face suddenly looked careful. Barron looked at his dad, and something hard to describe passed between them. "That suggestion is disgusting," the president finally said, but his voice didn't sound as confident as usual. "My family's health is our private business." "Normally, I would agree," Crockett said softly, "unless $300 million of public money is used to get that health information and then sell it off for private use. The American public has a right to know what their money paid for." She looked directly at Barron. "Mr. Trump, would you like to tell us what the test showed?" It was the most tense moment, a question that made everyone in the room hold their breath. Barron looked at his dad, then at Crockett, and then at the camera showing this moment to millions of Americans. "The test showed that I have a rare gene change," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. "One that makes me really good at thinking, but also means I need special watching and treatment. Treatment that is now only available to a few people and that other Americans with the same gene change can't get." He stopped and took a deep breath. "I didn't choose my genes, but I can choose to be open about this. This technology, made with public money, should help all Americans who helped pay for it."
What you said today shows bravery that is rare in Washington. She turned to everyone on the committee. Her voice now sounded like it had a moral weight to it. The papers shown today aren't just about one family or one government program. They're about a system that has allowed public resources to be taken and used for the benefit of a few people. A system we need to completely change. President Trump finally got his composure back, but the damage was done. He had lost control of what was happening, and for the first time, he truly seemed lost for words in the face of his own son's calm honesty and the Congresswoman's sharp, careful questions. The moment that really defined the whole hearing happened when Congresswoman Crockett, with careful planning, held up one last paper. "To finish, I want to show this secret note from the Department of Health," she said, her voice calm but clearly carrying a lot of authority. "It explains how Project Legacy was specially changed 3 years ago to focus on testing the genes of important people. This happened not by chance, right after the president's son's first tests." Barron, still standing, looked right at the paper, and you could see he recognized it. "The note includes a study of how much it was worth," Crockett continued, "figuring out how much the technology made with public money could be sold for. The value, $1.7 billion. The price it was sold for to the Trump family science company, $5 million. She paused, letting the crazy difference between the numbers sink in for everyone. "What we have here isn't just using money wrongly," she said, lowering her voice on purpose, making everyone listen closely. "It's taking public new ideas for private money." Then, looking straight at the president, she said the line that would be remembered from the whole hearing. "Truth doesn't become less true just because it's not convenient for your family." This simple, powerful statement landed in the room like lightning. Cameras clicked like crazy. Reporters typed on their devices. Social media blew up right away. Barron Trump, in a moment of clarity that seemed to go beyond years of being taught to be quiet, said something just as strong. "Privileged isn't about who has a lot, but who takes a lot of what belongs to everyone." And the picture was striking. Congresswoman Crockett, a lawyer who started fighting for people from the ground up.
Barron Trump, who grew up with unbelievable advantages, now together in a moment of truth that went beyond politics. President Trump, realizing he had lost control, tried one last thing. "This is a fake show. My son is being controlled by political groups." Crockett answered with sharp precision. "Mr. President, I wasn't the one who brought these papers to this hearing. It was your son who decided to speak up. This isn't a political thing. It's about being responsible." She spoke to the whole committee again. "The papers Mr. Trump gave us prove our investigation was right. Government money was used to make advanced gene technology that was later sold off for the Trump family's benefit, while the public who paid for it couldn't use it." The president, now clearly angry, stood up quickly. "This joke is over. My lawyers will take care of this from now on." But before he could leave, Crockett made her last move, the big question she had been planning for the whole time. "Mr. President, one last question. Did the special gene tests done on your son show things you wanted to keep secret? Things about his genes that might make people think differently about him?" The silence that followed was deafening. The president froze, and his face suddenly looked worried. Barron looked at his dad, and something you couldn't quite put your finger on passed between them. "That suggestion is awful," the president finally answered, but his voice didn't have its usual confidence. "My family's health is a private matter." "Normally, I would agree," Crockett said softly. "Except when $300 million of public money is used to get that health information and then sell it off for private use. The American public has a right to know what their money bought." She looked directly at Barron. "Mr. Trump, would you like to say something about what the tests showed?" It was the most exciting moment, a question that made everyone in the room wait with perfect anticipation. Barron looked at his dad, then at Crockett, and finally at the cameras broadcasting this moment to millions of Americans. "The tests showed that I have a rare gene change," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. "One that makes me really good at thinking, but also means I need special watching and treatment. Treatment that is now only owned by our company, and people with the same gene change can't get." He stopped, taking a deep breath. "I didn't choose my genes, but I can choose to be open to a system we need to completely change." President Trump finally got his composure back, but the damage was done. He had lost control of what was happening, and for the first time he seemed truly unsure of what to say in the face of his own son's calm honesty and the Congresswoman's constant sharp questioning. The moment that truly defined the whole hearing happened when Congresswoman Crockett, with careful planning, held up a final paper. "To finish, I want to show this secret note from the Department of Health," she said, her voice calm but clearly carrying a lot of authority. "It explains how Project Legacy was specifically changed 3 years ago to focus on studying the genes of important people, not by chance, right after the president's son's first tests." Barron, still standing, looked directly at the paper, and you could see he knew what it was. "The note includes a study of how much it was worth," Crockett continued, "figuring out how much the technology made with public money would be worth if it was sold. The value? $1.7 billion. The price it was sold for to the Trump family science company? $5 million. She paused, letting the ridiculous difference between the numbers make an impact on everyone in the room. "What we have here isn't just using money wrongly," she said, lowering her voice on purpose, forcing everyone to listen carefully. "It's taking public new ideas for private money." Then, looking straight at the president, she delivered the line that would sum up the entire hearing. "Truth doesn't become less true just because it's not convenient for your family." The simple, powerful way she said this hit the room like a lightning bolt. Cameras clicked like crazy, reporters typed on their devices, social media instantly blew up. Barron Trump, in a clear moment that seemed to go beyond years of being taught to be quiet, responded with words that were just as strong. "Privileged isn't about who has a lot, but who takes a lot of what belongs to everyone." And the picture of them was amazing. Congresswoman Crockett, a lawyer who fought for people from the bottom up. Barron Trump, who grew up with huge advantages, now together in a moment of truth that went beyond political sides. President Trump, realizing he had lost control, tried one last time. "This is a setup show. My son is being controlled by political groups." But right then, Barron looked directly at his dad, not angry, but with a quiet determination that made the room silent. "Dad," he said, his voice soft but perfectly clear in the microphones, "nobody controlled me. I read the papers. I saw the money transfers. The controlling was when I was told that I got into college only because I was good enough, when actually it was helped by technology paid for by taxpayers that was later sold off to our family." The simple truth of this, said without drama or blaming, hit much harder than any big fight ever could. It was real, you couldn't deny it, and it was perfect for a short video clip that would soon be everywhere online. The president, for the first time, seemed truly unsure of what to say. His usual way of just saying no way or fighting back hard didn't work against his own son's quiet honesty. Congresswoman Crockett, sensing this historic moment, didn't try to gain an advantage. Instead, she spoke with a calm respect that made the moment feel even more important, above political sides. "Maybe the biggest test of who we are isn't how we handle things going wrong, but how we handle advantages we didn't earn," she said. Today, we saw a young man face that hard truth with amazing honesty. She spoke to the whole committee. "This isn't a moment for one political side to win. It's a call for both sides to change how new ideas paid for by the public help all Americans, not just the few with advantages." The camera showed everyone's faces in the room. The hesitant respect on the faces of people on the president's side, the surprise on the faces of people on the other side, and something even stronger on Barron's face, relief. The relief of finally telling the truth no matter what the results. Being respectable isn't about hiding the truth, but about facing it, especially when it's hard. With these words, she finished asking questions, leaving the room in a silence that was louder than anything that could have been said. A silence that would be filled in the hours and days after with a loud demand across the country for people to be held responsible and for things to change. What happened in that room spread out like ripples on a pond, each circle getting bigger and having more impact than the one before. In the first few hours after the hearing, the news showed the most exciting parts over and over. The moment Barron stood up to speak, the Congresswoman's powerful statement about truth being inconvenient, Barron's thoughtful answer about privilege.
Young Barron Trump, who was usually just in the background of the Trump family, suddenly became a symbol of doing the right thing for many Americans. His refusal to stay quiet when something wasn't fair, even though he personally benefited from it, really connected with people. Congresswoman Crockett was praised not just for her careful investigation, but for how she focused on the bigger problems in the system instead of just attacking people. The way she treated Barron with respect, seeing him as his own person separate from his dad, was pointed out as a good example of a grown-up political leader. A week after the hearing, the White House said they would completely look at Project Legacy and other similar programs. Barron Trump, in a decision that surprised many, announced that he was starting a group to make sure that medical technology made with public money would be available to everyone. "Nobody chooses how they are born," he said at a press conference, "but we can all choose what we do with the advantages we get." Congresswoman Crockett was asked to help with this group, and she said yes, showing that she cared more than just about political sides. In towns all over the country, regular people started questioning other times when public things were sold off for private money. College students organized talks about being good enough versus having special advantages. Teachers in Georgia used the example to teach their students about being good citizens. A doctor in California started thinking differently about his part in research paid for by the government.
The biggest impact, though, was on how people talked about being responsible and open. The picture of Congresswoman Crockett calmly showing the truth, combined with Barron Trump's surprising honesty, became a strong symbol of how doing the right thing can win against power that has been around for a long time. Maybe the most important moment happened 3 weeks after the hearing when President Trump, in a rare moment where he showed his feelings, admitted in a special interview that even though he didn't agree with how his son did it, he respected his bravery. Barron has always been the child who thinks the most, he said. Maybe he's seeing something that the rest of us aren't ready to see yet. This reluctant admission, even though he added some conditions, was a huge shift in how things worked in politics. The president's usual way of always wanting to win no matter what was replaced by something more thoughtful. He seemed to recognize that maybe the systems of advantage that helped his family should be looked at again. 6 months after the historic hearing, the American political scene showed signs of real change. Project Legacy had been completely redone with new rules, making sure that technology made with public money is available to everyone. Barron Trump's group, the Foundation for Fair Innovation, had already helped hundreds of families who couldn't afford advanced gene treatments get them. Congresswoman Crockett, who was on the group's advising team, helped make sure that communities who often get left out were not forgotten. Perhaps the most important thing was how people across the country were talking about privilege and being responsible. In colleges, at work, and in communities, people were having more honest conversations about how not having equal access to things changes people's chances. A woman in Iowa watching the hearing on TV saw the same thing happening with how government jobs were given out in her city. A teacher in Georgia used the example to teach his students about doing the right thing for the community. A doctor in California rethought her involvement in research paid for by the public. For Congresswoman Crockett, the biggest lasting impact wasn't about politics, but about doing the right thing. She showed the truth, when told carefully and with dignity, can still change things. What happened in that room wasn't just about one family or one government program, she said in an interview a year later. It was about needing the courage to face truths that are not easy, especially when they challenge our own advantages. And what about Barron Trump? The young man who surprised the country with his moral honesty keeps doing his work, now studying government rules along with his business classes. He is a living example of how even people born with the most advantages can choose to use their position to help everyone. True respectability, he said in a speech to students, isn't about denying advantages, but about admitting them and using them to create a fairer system for everyone. This is the lasting truth that came from that amazing moment. That being morally great isn't measured by how much money or power you have, but by the courage to face truth and the kindness to turn it into something good. I could stop here, but what will really stay with you is in the next video. It's right there on your screen, and honestly, it's the best thing you'll watch this week.